Welcome to HOA mess. The board picked the wrong week to play games. I was scraping frost off my windshield at 5:45 in the morning when Betty Reed appeared out of the pre-dawn gloom holding a clipboard and a snow pusher like she was about to declare war. "She is not abandoned," I said before she could open her mouth, nodding at my car. "I work early." She tilted her head, smiled with zero warmth, and said, "Your plate is covered in snow. That is a violation. I am starting the tow process." The threat hit me like a bucket of slush. I had moved into Iron Gate Winter District in Buffalo, New York, exactly 11 days earlier, and this was the fourth time she had cornered me in the parking lot. I am an auto mechanic. I start work at 6. I do not have time for this. She tapped her clipboard. "I do not care what the weather did. I care what the rule says. And the rule says visible plates at all times. I will give you 10 minutes to clear it, or the tow company gets the call." Then she turned and walked back toward the clubhouse, her snow pusher scraping the pavement like a warning. I moved to Buffalo because the shop where I worked in Syracuse closed, and a friend offered me a lead mechanic job at a place near the waterfront. The pay was good, the commute was under 20 minutes, and the condo I found in Iron Gate was affordable if I could close the refinance in time. Iron Gate Winter District Snow Route Association ran the neighborhood, and the paperwork made it sound strict but reasonable. Snow route compliance, emergency access, basic upkeep. What they did not mention was that Betty Reed, the Welcome Committee chair, treated winter rules like a personal enforcement empire. She timed every confrontation for my work departure. She knew I could not afford to be late, could not afford a tow, could not afford any lien threat that might derail my refinance approval. And she used that pressure like a weapon. The first sign of trouble came on day 3. I parked in my assigned spot after a midnight snowfall. The plow had pushed a drift against my bumper. I shoveled a path to my door and left for work. When I got home, there was a notice zip-tied to my door handle, a laminated card that said winter compliance violation in bold letters, no readable fine amount, just a line that said refer to Winter Addendum Section 4. I did not have the Winter Addendum. I had asked for it at signing and been told it would be emailed. It never came. I called the management office. They said they would send it. They did not. 2 days later, another notice. This time, it was about my snow pile placement. I had shoveled my walk and put the snow at the edge of my spot, same as everyone else. Betty left a note saying I was blocking emergency egress, and I owed a $100 fine. When I tried to talk to her, she said, "You should have read the rules before you moved in, sweetheart." That line stuck in my head. She said it with a smile, like she was doing me a favor by pointing out my ignorance. I kept my voice low, because my trump card needed perfect timing. I had already started gathering proof. I had doorbell video from the day she showed up at 6 in the morning, banging on my door and yelling about a snow emergency that did not exist. I had screenshots of the email thread where I asked for the winter addendum and got nothing. And I had a friend at the county clerk's office who owed me a favor. I filed a records request with the association, asking for the full winter addendum, the enforcement log, and any correspondence about my violations. The response came back in 3 days. They wanted $50 for copying fees and another $75 for administrative review. I paid it because I needed the paper trail. What I got was a partial packet with half the pages missing and a cover letter that said the rest required board approval to release. That was when I knew something was wrong. Legitimate HOAs do not hide their own rules behind paywalls. I kept the receipt, kept the partial packet in a plastic sleeve, and started building my case. But I could not move too fast. My refinance approval was in underwriting, and any lien or collections action would kill it. I needed to stay clean until closing. Then I could fight back. Betty escalated on day 7. She sent an email blast to the entire neighborhood, subject line Winter Safety Compliance Update. It did not name me directly, but it described my unit number and said one resident refuses winter safety protocols and poses a risk to emergency access. The email included a photo of my car taken at an angle that made the snowdrift look twice as big as it was. My phone lit up with messages from neighbors I had never met, some asking if I was okay, others saying they supported the board. One guy, a quiet neighbor named Ray who lived 2 units down, sent me a text that just said, "She is lying. I have screenshots. Call me." I called him that night. Ray was retired, spent most of his time walking his dog, and had been in Iron Gate for 6 years. He told me Betty had pulled the same stunt on 3 other people, all new move-ins, all during their first winter. She targeted people who could not fight back, people who were stretched thin or on tight schedules. Her goal was not compliance, it was control. And she had a pattern. She would escalate violations until someone either paid up or moved out. Then she would back off and find a new target. Ray had saved screenshots of her posts in the neighborhood group chat. Messages where she bragged about getting people towed, getting fines doubled, getting liens filed. He offered to testify if it came to that. I thanked him and added his screenshots to my evidence folder. The next morning, I cleared my plate before she could call the tow truck. But she found something else. She said my snow shovel was stored in a common area, even though it was leaning against my own front step. She left another notice. Another $100 fine. I ignored it. I was waiting for the refinance to close. I had 2 weeks left. I could not afford to provoke her. Then came the small claims filing. Betty did not file it herself. The association filed it, with her name listed as the compliance officer. The claim was for $600 in unpaid winter fines, plus legal fees, plus a demand for immediate lien placement. The hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday, the same day I had a critical refinance document signing. I could not be in 2 places at once. That was the point. She was trying to force me into a default judgment. I called my attorney, a guy I knew from a previous landlord dispute. He looked at the filing and laughed. He said it was the sloppiest claim he had ever seen. No itemized violations, no proof of notice, no signed acknowledgement of the winter addendum I had never received. He said we could fight it, but it would take time and money. Or I could settle and move on. I told him no. I was not settling. I had evidence, I had witnesses, and I was going to win. If you are enjoying this story, hit the like button and subscribe for more HOA nightmare tales. But before I could file my response, Betty staged her first major set piece. It was a Saturday morning, and I was home for once. I heard voices outside and looked out my window. Betty was going door to door with a clipboard and a printed petition. She was collecting signatures to demand emergency snow route enforcement and expedited towing for repeat offenders. She was framing it like a safety campaign, but everyone she talked to, she mentioned my unit number. She said I was the problem. She said I was putting people at risk. I watched her work her way down the block, and I recorded the whole thing on my phone. She did not know I was filming. When she got to Ray's door, he opened it, listened to her pitch, and said, "I am not signing anything that targets a specific person." She tried to argue. He shut the door. She moved on. I walked outside while she was still on the next block. I approached her calmly, hands in my pockets, and asked what the petition was for. She smiled and said, "Community safety, just making sure we all follow the rules." I asked if she had a copy of the winter addendum she kept citing. She said it was available at the office. I said I had requested it 3 times and been charged $125 for a partial copy. She shrugged. "That is the process. If you do not like it, you can move." I kept my voice even. I said, "I am not moving. And I am not paying fines for rules I was never given." She leaned in close, still smiling, and said, "I do not care what the weather did. I care what the rule says. And the rule says you are in violation. I will see you at the hearing." I went back inside and called my attorney. I told him about the petition, the door-to-door campaign, the repeated harassment. He said it was building a pattern, and if we could tie it to financial motive, we could turn it into a counterclaim. I asked what he meant. He said, if she is using her position to extract fees that are not legitimate, that is a problem. If she is hiding rules to create violations, that is a bigger problem. And if the association is backing her without proper documentation, that is the biggest problem. He told me to keep gathering evidence and to file a formal complaint with the management company. I did. I attached Ray's screenshots, my doorbell video, the email thread, and the incomplete rule packet. I sent it certified mail. The management company responded in 4 days with a form letter that said they were reviewing my concerns and would respond within 30 days. Translation: they were stalling. That was when the side complication kicked in. Every time Betty confronted me, she timed it for my work departure. I had to leave by 5:50 to get to the shop on time, and she knew it. She would show up at 5:45, start an argument, and keep me trapped in the parking lot while the clock ticked. If I left, she would call it evasion and escalate the fines. If I stayed, I was late to work. My boss was understanding the first 2 times. The 3rd time, he pulled me aside and said he needed reliability. I explained the situation. He said he believed me, but he could not keep covering my late arrivals. I was on thin ice. The twist came in week 3. Ray called me and said he had been digging through the association's financial records, the ones posted online for homeowners. He found something. The Winter Enforcement Fund, the account that was supposed to cover plowing and salting, was short by almost $12,000. The ledger showed payments going out to a contractor that did not exist. Ray ran the business name through the state database. No registration, no LLC, no tax filings. It was a shell. And the payments were signed off by Betty. She was not just targeting me for control, she was covering missing HOA money. The fake violations were a smokescreen. If she could keep people focused on my non-compliance, no one would look at the books. I met Ray at a coffee shop off the main road. He showed me the printouts, highlighted the entries, walked me through the timeline. The missing payments lined up with the same months she started her enforcement blitz. I asked if he had sent this to the board. He said he tried. They ignored him. He asked if I was ready to go public. I said not yet. I needed my refinance to close first. He understood, but he said if I waited too long, she would bury the evidence. I promised I would move as soon as I had the clear to close. He gave me copies of everything and said he would back me up when the time came. The second escalation step hit 2 days later. The small claims hearing got moved up. No explanation, just a notice that said the date was now the following Monday, the same day as my document signing. I called the courthouse. They said the plaintiff requested an expedited hearing due to emergency circumstances. I asked what emergency. They could not tell me. I called my attorney. He filed a motion to delay. The judge denied it. We were locked in. I had to choose between my refinance and my defense. I chose the refinance. My attorney would represent me at the hearing. But that meant I could not testify in person, could not present my evidence face to face, could not force Betty to answer questions under oath. She had outmaneuvered me. Then, Betty made her biggest mistake. She decided she needed one more piece of evidence to lock in her case, something visual and dramatic that would make me look negligent. She chose the community footbridge, the iced-over walkway that crossed a drainage ditch between the parking lot and the clubhouse. It was a known hazard. The HOA was supposed to salt it daily. They had not. Ray had complained twice. Nothing changed. Betty decided to stage a photo showing black ice as proof that I was ignoring safety protocols, even though the footbridge was nowhere near my unit. I found out because Ray was walking his dog that morning and saw her setting up. He texted me, said she was pouring water on the bridge to make it look worse. I grabbed my phone and my coat and ran. I got there just as she was crouched down with a water bottle, spreading a fresh puddle over the existing ice. I started recording. She did not see me. She stood up, backed away, pulled out her phone, and started taking pictures like she had just discovered the hazard. I walked up behind her and said, "That is a good trick. Does the board know you are creating the violations you are reporting?" She spun around, face going red. I held up my phone, screen facing her so she could see the recording counter. I said, "I have you on video, pouring water, staging evidence. You want to explain that at the hearing?" She lunged for my phone. I stepped back. She slipped on the ice she had just made, caught herself on the railing, and screamed, "You cannot do that." I said, "I just did. And I am sending this to my attorney, the management company, and the board." She recovered her balance, grabbed her snow pusher, and started yelling about trespassing, about harassment, about filing a restraining order. I kept recording. Ray appeared from the other side of the bridge, his dog on a leash, his own phone out and recording. He said, "I saw the whole thing, Betty. You poured the water. You staged the photo. It is on video." Betty froze. Her mouth opened and closed. Then she screamed, "You are both liars. I am calling the police." She pulled out her phone and dialed. I let her. When the officer arrived 20 minutes later, I showed him my video. Ray showed him his. Betty tried to explain that she was documenting a pre-existing hazard. The officer asked why she was pouring water on it. She said she was testing the surface. He did not buy it. He took our information, told Betty to stop contacting me outside official channels, and left. Betty stood there on the bridge, shaking with rage, and said, "This is not over." I said, "You are right. It is not." I sent the video to my attorney that afternoon. He forwarded it to the court, to the management company, and to the HOA board president. Within 2 hours, the management company called me. They said they were launching an internal review and asked if I would be willing to attend a board meeting to present my concerns. I said yes, but only if Ray could attend as a witness and only if I could bring printed copies of my evidence. They agreed. The meeting was set for the following Thursday, 3 days after my refinance closed. The small claims hearing happened while I was at the title company signing loan documents. My attorney called me an hour later. He said the judge watched the footbridge video, reviewed the evidence packet, and dismissed the case with prejudice. No fines, no liens, no fees. The judge also issued a warning to the association about frivolous filings and instructed them to provide me with a full copy of all governing documents within 10 days at no charge. It was a clean win, but it was not enough. I wanted accountability. I wanted Betty off the board. And I wanted the missing $12,000 explained. The board meeting was held in the clubhouse community room. About 30 people showed up, more than usual according to Ray. I walked in with a binder of evidence, printed and tabbed. Ray had a second binder with the financial records. Betty was already seated at the front table, her face stone calm, her snow pusher leaning against the wall behind her like a prop. The board president, a man in his 60s named Clark, opened the meeting and said they would hear my complaint. I stood up. I did not waste time. I said, I am here because Betty Reed has used her position to harass me, fabricate violations, and stage false evidence. I have video proof, witness testimony, and a documented pattern of misconduct. And I have evidence that she has been covering up financial irregularities in the Winter Enforcement Fund. The room went quiet. Betty stood up and said, "That is slander." I said, "It is not slander if it is true." I brought a printed evidence packet in a binder and slid copies to the board and the room at once. Clark opened his copy. I walked him through it. The doorbell video, the staged ice stunt, the missing contractor payments, the incomplete rule packets, the fake emergency email blast. Ray stood and corroborated the financial findings. Another neighbor, a woman named Linda, stood and said Betty had done the same thing to her 2 years earlier. She had paid the fines to avoid the fight, but she had kept the notices. She pulled them out of her purse and handed them to the board. Betty tried to respond. She said the financial records were incomplete, that the contractor was legitimate, that I was twisting the facts. Clark cut her off. He said, "Betty, did you stage the ice hazard photo?" She hesitated. He said, "We have 2 videos. Yes or no?" She said I was documenting a safety issue. He said, "By pouring water on the walkway." She said, "I was conducting a test." The room erupted. People started shouting questions. Someone yelled, "Where is the $12,000? Someone else yelled, "Why are we paying fines for rules we never got?" Clark banged the gavel and called for order. Then Ray stood again and said, "I have one more thing." He opened a folder and pulled out a printed email chain. He said, "This is correspondence between Betty and the management company from 18 months ago. She requested authority to impose fines without board approval for winter violations. The board denied it. She did it anyway. He handed the pages to Clark. Clark read them, his face darkening. He looked at Betty and said, "Is this true?" She said, "That was a miscommunication." He said, "You imposed fines without authority. You collected money that was not owed. That is theft." Betty's face went white. She said, "I did not steal anything." Clark said, "Then where is the contractor? Produce the invoices. Produce the business license." She said, "I do not have them here." He said, "You have 48 hours. If you cannot provide proof, We are referring this to the county attorney and removing you from all board positions effective immediately." The room erupted again. Betty grabbed her coat and her snow pusher and walked out. She did not say another word. Clark adjourned the meeting and said they would reconvene in 2 days to vote on her removal and to issue a formal apology to me and anyone else she had targeted. I stayed after to thank Ray and Linda. Ray shook my hand and said, "She picked the wrong guy." 2 days later, the board reconvened. Betty did not attend. Her attorney sent a letter saying she was resigning from the Welcome Committee and from all association roles effective immediately. She did not provide the contractor documentation. The board voted unanimously to refer the financial discrepancy to the county attorney. They also voted to adopt an enforcement checklist that limits Karen tactics, requiring written notice with full rule citations, a 10-day cure period, and board approval for any fine over $50. They issued a public apology to me, to Linda, and to 2 other residents who came forward with similar stories, and they gave me a fine waiver in writing with a firm no-contact directive, meaning Betty could not email me, call me, or approach me outside of official association business. The county attorney opened an investigation. I do not know how it ended, but I heard from Ray a few months later that Betty had moved out of Iron Gate and that the missing money was never recovered. The board hired a new management company and rewrote the winter rules to be clear, fair, and actually available to residents at no charge. My refinance closed the day after the first board meeting. I got the house. I kept my job. And I never saw Betty Reed again. The funny karma moment came about a week after her resignation. The board was reviewing old meeting minutes to figure out how Betty had gotten so much unchecked authority. They found a recording from a meeting 2 years earlier where she had argued for expanded enforcement powers. In her pitch, she confidently read a section of the rules out loud to justify her position. Except, she read from the wrong section. She had quoted the guest parking rules and applied them to winter violations. The board at the time had not caught it because no one had the full rulebook in front of them. But the error was on record. Her entire enforcement regime was built on a mistake she had made and never corrected. When Ray told me, I laughed so hard I had to sit down. She had spent 2 years terrorizing people over rules she had misread from the start. I still live in Iron Gate. The neighborhood is quieter now. The new management company is responsive. The rules are clear, and every time it snows, I think about that morning on the footbridge when Betty tried to create evidence and got caught on camera instead. I kept my voice low because my trump card needed perfect timing, and when I finally played it, it was perfect. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.